Hello, basketball coaches and basketball players. My name is Alan from Al's Basketball Training, and today I am going to talk to you about how you can beat any zone defense, or at least most zone defenses in basketball. The only zone defense this won't beat is my Unbeatable basketball defense, which again is in the description below if you haven't checked it out just yet. But anyways, in a zone defense, there is a huge weakness, and that is when you're attacking the zone. If you're attacking a gap, that means that is an area that is a double team area. Just inherently, that's what it is. Let me explain to you really quickly on the clipboard. So basically, in a zone defense, I'm showing you the 2-3 zone defense right here. Player 3 and all of the other players are not guarding an individual man, they're guarding an area of the court. Which means that, well, 3 is playing that spot, player 1 is guarding that area, player 2 is guarding this area, player 5 is guarding this area, and player 4 is guarding that area. Now, as we can see, there are gaps in the zone. So there's a gap here between players 1 and 3, same as between 1 and 2, and between 4 and 3. In those gaps, that is an overlapping area where those two players in between those areas, those zones, have to, or at least are taught to double team those locations. Now, you can actually really exploit a zone defense using this strategy, or knowing that the defense is going to do that. Now, really quickly, if player 2 was to attack in the middle of player 1 and 3, in theory, that should bring both players to try and stop player 2 from penetrating into the key, and then making him go either towards the right or left side. Now, the whole idea behind penetrating or attacking the gap, which is right there, is if we were to have another player out on the wing, maybe a player in the low post, and maybe a player up at the point, by attacking that gap, we now have the ability to get player 1 the basketball, to get player 4 the basketball, really super easily. Now, by getting player 1 the ball, and if he's quick enough, he can attack the gap over here along the baseline, and player 5 can move up in between the middle of the key, which now player 2 will then pop out. Player 3 is going to go and try and cut off player 1. Player 1, red, is going to go over so that he is in the passing lane for player 2. And when player 1 attacks the gap, which would be between players 5 and 3, again drawing a double team, and now player 5, blue, is wide open. Now, if he is not wide open and player 4 comes over to play defense, this is when read and react come into play. Now, read and react is a strategy and a couple of play sets that you can run with your team, and that is by explaining to your team on a clipboard, but also on the gym floor as well, because everyone learns in a different way. That when you attack and you draw a double team, that means that there's a player open. That first pass to that open player may be open for a second for that player to be able to score. If he is unable to score off of receiving that first pass, that means that a player is moving over, maybe into an area of the court that they're not supposed to be, or maybe over helping so that they don't have an easy basket, let's say in the key, or maybe the first pass when kicking it out towards the 3-point line. This is when read and react come into play, and you make the extra pass. We've all heard and we've all watched the Raptors games, the LA Lakers games, whatever. We've all seen those NBA games when that color commentator says, "Wow, that was a fantastic extra pass." That's all what it means. They've kicked the ball out, or they got it to a player who's open, who gets closed out on really quickly, which now leaves another player open, so that now that second pass creates an easy basket. Sometimes it's not just an extra pass. Sometimes it's an extra pass. But you get what I'm talking about. It's that read what the defense is doing, what the defense is giving you, and reacting to it positively by either scoring, attacking the rim, or passing the ball. Let me show you another strategy that you can use in this same idea where you're attacking the gaps, but I'm going to change it to a 3-2 zone. So we have a 3-2 zone defense. Let's get rid of the offensive players really quickly so that we understand what the 3-2 zone defense is all about. And that is having player 5 and 4, they're going to be protecting the key. I'm going to make those circles a little bit better. Meanwhile, we're going to be having player 1 in the high post as well as the point. And we're going to be having, most likely, most coaches will teach their teams the 3-2 by having the 3 and the 2 player guarding the whole wing. Now, some coaches, I was taught this when I was very young, will have these 2 players guard way out towards the wings, and then, way out towards the wings, and then we'll have players 3, 1, and 2 guarding the free throw line extended as well as the point. So it all comes down to how the other team's coach or yourself is coaching the 3-2, but the ideas are the same. And that is attack the gaps that we have. Now, against a 3-2 zone, there's more gaps to attack, so it's going to allow you to create multiple different scoring opportunities. So let's just get a quick, simple offense on so we can understand basically how to attack the gaps. So, I'm not necessarily running a 4-out just because there's a strategy behind it. I'm not. It's just the way I like to teach some teams. I sometimes run a 5-out. It just all comes down to what you're comfortable with teaching. But let's say we have player 1 attacking the gap, which would be between players 1 and 3. They are going to close on player 1. Now we can have player 4 run towards the point, and again we have 2 passing opportunities. If we pass to player 4, that's going to draw possibly player 2 up, and most likely player 1 up. In which case now the extra pass, we have player 3 wide open for a 3-point shot. Now, like I was mentioning, it's not always necessarily that first extra pass. We could have player 4 running out to play defense, and we could have player 5 attacking the other block. There's usually a block there. And then that's when we would have player 3 pass down to player 5 for an easy layup. Now, if you're a really short team and you're running up against a 3-2 zone, this would be a fantastic strategy if you wanted to get some nice close baskets. This also could create an issue where player 5 may want to come over to play help defense just so that player 5 blue doesn't score. Player 4 red is going to pop back down. We can now have the weak side attack, and in this case, player 2 might get an easy layup as well. And this strategy also works in the full court press. Let me show you really quick what I'm talking about. So let's say we're going up against a diamond, or what's also called a 1-2-1-1 full court press. Now the whole idea in a press defense is to trap you, the offensive team, in these corners. But also, there's a very fancy strategy that you could use. So let's say we get player 1 blue open to get that ball inbounded. Obviously, player 1 red is going to run over to play defense. We would want player 2 to go out wide and player 3 to pop back inside the court. That's when we're going to reverse the ball, and we want player 3 to attack this gap. The gap in between player 1 and player 3, which is the opposite side as to what player 1 is on. Player 3 is going to be attacking that gap, and because the defensive team does not want anything up the middle, they want everything up the side, this is now allowing you to now essentially draw a double team, which means that there's going to be a player open. Now, if your team is quick, you can have a quick pass over to player 2, and generally speaking, most coaches and most players will not want to dribble the ball up the sideline. This is when you do not dribble the ball up the sideline. This is when you can do one of two things. And this player 2 has to think super quick. If player 4 is not cutting off that pass right away, player 2 could pass to player 4 and we can set up our offense. That's the best case scenario. If this is not open and we had player 4 move over to take away that pass, of course there's still the option for a lob pass. We may have player 5 over on that side to cut off the lob pass. We could always do a cross-court pass, which is generally what you don't want to do, but if it's wide open, well, why not? But again, player 2 red could cut that off pretty easily, so personally, last case scenario. What I would do if player 5 is shadowing player 4 is to attack the gap again. Now, in theory, the gap is, there's another gap right here. So, if player 3 is trying to close out to force you over here, player 2 could attack this gap, what's happening here. We could then have player 5 showing to mid-court, and then we could have player 1 run up that sideline. So now one of two things are happening. We now have a double team right on that side. We want player 3 to go on the outside. This is our last case scenario. Our number one option is to player 5. Our secondary option is to player 1. And our third and final, and the option we do not want to do, is a pass over to player 3. This is how you beat, without any plays, this is how you beat a full court press. It doesn't matter. We'll get rid of the offensive players really quickly. It doesn't matter if it's a 1-2-2. There is a gap there and there's a gap there. If you attack that gap, let's say player 5, I know he's not a point guard, but let's say player 5 attacks that gap, that's going to draw those two players in. You have another player going up this wing. You have another player going up this wing. This player is obviously covered, but he's drawing this player away from the center. Next, you have these two players over here. You have player 5 pass over to player 2, and instead of dribbling up, a lot of players will dribble just this way up the sideline. That can get a quick push over to that corner. We don't want to do that. We want to have a quick, in this case, left-handed dribble up towards the middle of the court. We have now beat their press defense. And this essentially works, and this actually works for every press defense and every zone defense you will ever come against. And that is how you beat a zone defense without really even having to run any plays. It's just read and react. Attack the gaps and read and react. This is a strategy that I teach every single one of my players, and there's one reason behind it. The number one thing I teach my players offensively for plays is the 5-out, the pass and cut, the pass and screen away, and the pass and screen for. Those are the 3 plays I teach every single team I ever coach. And then once they learn that, because quite literally that's going to take one practice. If you don't know what I mean, go check out all my other videos on the 5-out and find the most basic beginner 5-out. And believe me, those plays will take seconds to teach most teams. And then the next practice, we learn this, because so many teams these days are running a zone defense, and all you really need to do is attack the gaps. You don't need any special plays. You can if you want, because this can get old, but if your team is quick and they can handle the ball and they can pass, attack the gaps, find the open man, make the extra pass, and you have yourself a playless, no play, playless offense that will always work. Always. Every single time. I hope that you've enjoyed today's video. Hit that like button, subscribe, and I'll see you guys again, well, later on today for the second video of the day.